Imagine waking up to headlines about billionaires whose fortunes surpass the GDP of small countries. Envision governments where lobbyists wield more influence than the electorate, and corporate interests eclipse the public will. Picture citizens feeling powerless, their votes drowned out by cash and clout. This is the world in which the old specter of oligarchy, ruled by the few, thrives again. Today, towering skyscrapers and digital monopolies have replaced the marble columns of ancient city-states, but the underlying tensions remain. In a realm where wealth concentrates at the top, the very architecture of our democracy groans under the strain. How do we keep the promise of representation alive when moneyed interests grow ever bolder? How do we ensure that the common good doesn't become a distant echo beneath the chorus of elite self-interest? Aristotle, writing centuries before social media and global finance, observed these same struggles in the polis of his day. His vision, where equality nurtures engagement, law tames power, and justice secures the public interest, remains startlingly relevant. Although his world was smaller and more immediate, he saw through to the core of political life. Either we cultivate a system that benefits all, or we enable one that empowers the privileged few at everyone else's expense. In our time, the stakes have only grown. If we can't heed Aristotle's warnings, we risk watching democracy atrophy into a mere facade, overshadowed by an unaccountable elite. But if we do listen, if we learn from his triads of governance and adapt them to our modern context, we may yet protect and strengthen the civic spirit that holds us together. Let's explore Aristotle's framework to see how democracy weaves a tapestry of inclusion, accountability, and shared prosperity. And in contrast, we'll shine a light on oligarchy's darker threads: inequality, corruption, and the precarious sway of private gain, threads that threaten to unravel the very fabric of our societies if left unchecked. Aristotle once wrote, "Democracy arises out of the notion that those who are equal in any respect are equal in all respects." For him, true equality meant granting people real access to political power. When individuals believe they can shape decisions, whether by voting, speaking up in assembly, or holding office, they feel invested in society's success. This sense of investment leads to civic engagement. You might think of engagement as a collective energy coursing through a democracy. When access is open and fair, people attend town halls, volunteer for community boards, or harness social media to express concerns. In ancient Athens, this engagement took the form of direct participation in public life. Decisions were made not by a single ruler, but through popular assemblies. From this emerges systemic stability. Aristotle reasoned that a society stands on firmer ground when its citizens can correct problems through established processes rather than resorting to rebellion. A democracy offers exactly that. If you disagree with a policy, you vote or campaign for an alternative. Compare this to an oligarchy, where access is restricted to an elite few who shape policy behind closed doors. Locked out of decision-making, the majority becomes resentful and often finds unstable, sometimes violent ways to express that discontent. Reflecting on our world today, it's clear this lesson has never been more pertinent. When whole segments of the population feel voiceless, whether due to economic status, racial discrimination, or geographic isolation, social and political upheaval often follows. Conversely, when people can meaningfully engage, voting in fair elections, or influencing policy through grassroots movements, society can adapt and grow without being toppled by unrest. Our challenge is to ensure equality and participation continue to feed our system's stability, rather than letting inequality, exclusion, and instability gain ground. Aristotle famously said, "The law is reason, free from passion." Yet he also believed in the importance of freedom, the individual autonomy that allows us to define our own lives. In a healthy democracy, laws don't undermine freedom, they protect it. Citizens agree on rules that safeguard not just their own rights, but everyone else's too. A society governed by fair legal frameworks treats laws as something more than a tool for the powerful. It sees them as the guarantor of each person's liberty. In ancient Athens, the concept of legal equality, or isonomia, was cherished because it meant that no one, however wealthy, stood above the law. Today we grapple with similar questions. Do our laws protect everyday citizens, or do they favor a privileged few? If they do the latter, freedom itself is compromised, turning into an illusion rather than a living principle. When the law acts as a balance, protecting personal freedoms while maintaining public order, it nurtures civic unity. People feel they're part of a shared venture rather than splintered factions perpetually at each other's throats. Contemporary societies demonstrate this vividly. In countries where laws apply equally to the richest tycoon and the most humble worker, you're more likely to find a cohesive social fabric. On the other hand, when legal structures are bent by corruption, pay-to-play politics, for instance, inequalities fester, and trust in institutions breaks down. Aristotle would warn us that an oligarchy uses law merely as a veneer, a mechanism to sanction the power of the wealthy few. The result is a vicious circle of wealth begetting self-interest breeding corruption, and corruption dissolving unity. For modern democracies, the lesson is clear. Freedom is strong only when laws are just, and laws remain just only when society stands together in holding leaders accountable. Finally, Aristotle considered political representation central to a legitimate government. In a democracy, representation typically follows majority rule, anchoring decision-making in the will of the many. This majority rule, however, isn't meant to trample minority rights. On the contrary, it's designed to advance the common good. Policies formed by diverse voices can create outcomes that broadly benefit society. For Aristotle, justice was the glue that held everything together. If laws and policies serve everyone's interest rather than a narrow segment, people deem the system fair. And when they see fairness in action, they trust their leaders and the processes that govern them. That trust fosters a more stable, creative, and forward-thinking society. Transplant these ideas into our own time and the implications are striking. Representation, if skewed by big money or gerrymandering, can quickly morph into minority rule, where a small cadre shapes policy to maximize private gain. The public sees resources flowing to the well-connected rather than the broader citizenry, and the perception of injustice grows. This erodes trust and invites the very instability that oligarchies are desperate to avoid. Aristotle's words resonate loudly in a global age. Whether we're discussing universal healthcare, climate change, or economic inequality, ensuring representation for the majority is key to policies that reflect the public interest. And if injustice prevails, if the system appears rigged, the foundations of governance can shake. Aristotle believed governance works like an ecosystem of ideas. Democracy's success depends on positive, self-reinforcing elements, equality that encourages participation, freedom that coexists with fair laws, and majority rule oriented towards justice. Oligarchy, by contrast, suffers from negative cycles. Wealth's dominance reinforces exclusion, corruption deepens mistrust in law, and injustice eventually challenges the system's legitimacy. What's extraordinary is how these insights from a city-state of the ancient world still speak volumes about the dynamics of power and governance in the 21st century. Our societies may be more complex with digital media, international trade, and global problems like climate change. Yet the fundamental patterns Aristotle described remain visible. Inclusive structures still promote stability. Exclusive power still leads to tension and conflict. He also offered a middle path, suggesting a balanced constitution that integrates democratic and aristocratic virtues. In modern terms, this could mean a robust civic culture anchored by an educated, prosperous middle class. People too grounded to be swayed by extreme populism, yet too numerous to be sidelined by the wealthy few. Aristotle reminds us that the health of a democracy is measured not only by its ideals, but by how it cares for its citizens across every layer of society. So consider the triads that shape your own political communities. Are they inclusive or exclusive, reinforcing or corroding, just or unjust? Aristotle's timeless challenge remains with us, to build, defend, and refine institutions that protect the many, not just the few, allowing freedom, fairness, and the common good to thrive together. We can keep Aristotle's lessons alive by refusing complacency in the face of injustice, and by continually striving for a society in which each voice truly matters.